Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Catnip Rants about stuff. Today, microtransactions and DLC. This is a very, very controversial topic, um, and one that I often see used incorrectly, like the terminology and stuff like that. A lot of times, I'll see people use DLC and microtransactions interchangeably and other stuff like that. And they're definitely different things. They're similar, but they are different. And yeah, so today I'm just going to be going over that. And yeah, should be fun. So the first thing I'm going to go over is what is the difference. Now, DLC is typically something you buy once, and after that, you're done. You never need to buy it again. You have the content right there, and it's all good. For example, Skyrim's DLC. There's 3 pieces, and you can buy them all. And once you've bought them all, you have them, they're good. Now, the difference is microtransactions are things that you normally would buy over and over and over again. And you see this in all kinds of games. Loot boxes, um, gacha games, those have tons of microtransactions usually. And yeah, so they're definitely a bit different, but you know, they are similar in the fact that they are both things that have to do with a game that you buy separately from the game itself. Now, most people prefer DLC over not loot boxes, microtransactions. There are other kinds of microtransactions than loot boxes. It doesn't have to be a loot box to be a microtransaction, but loot boxes are definitely a big topic that I'm going to go over today. Now, most people prefer DLC because with microtransactions, the goal of the developer is to get money. That's their one goal. They want you to buy something a lot. Like loot boxes, it's not something you buy once and then you're done. You if you play a game with loot boxes, chances are you're buying loot boxes over and over and over again. Chances are you've spent if you do choose to buy loot boxes. You don't have to buy loot boxes, but many people do. But chances are you've spent a lot of money on microtransactions, possibly more money than the game itself cost. And I'm not to say that can't happen with DLC. Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia. It's a 3DS game, so it costs $40, and the season pass is $45 because there's a lot of stuff in the season pass. There, that game has loads of DLC. And you might be thinking, "Wow, that's paying the price of a game for extra content is like that's not something I'd want to do." And that's all fine and reasonable. But it's microtransactions, they're not something you buy all at once. So it can more quickly get out of hand. Like with downloadable content, you see that the thing costs $45. You buy the thing for $45 and that's it. You've spent $45, you know you've spent $45, and it's all good. Microtransactions, on the other hand, it's a bit less obvious. Like, you could buy something, you could say, all right, I'm going to spend $10 on loot boxes today, and then in a month you could spend another $10. And if you spend $10 a month for 12 months, that's $120, which is three times more, almost three times more than the cost of Fire Emblem Echoes Season Pass. So yeah, microtransactions, they're usually small purchases, but they add up so quickly, and the amount of money you can be spending on these things is ridiculous, to be honest. And that's the main difference between microtransactions and DLC. Now, not all microtransactions are bad. Most are intended to exploit your money, but not all of them are bad. Um, DLC is almost never bad. There can be a few cases where downloadable content is worse than other pieces of downloadable content, but all in all, it's usually not bad. It's usually a good thing, actually. So, Skyrim, for example, Skyrim is a $60 game, and the DLC is 20, 20, and 5. So the Skyrim's DLC costs $45 as well if you buy it all separately. Now you could get like the Game of the Year edition or the special edition or whatever and have all the DLC installed already, but um yeah, the the point of DLC, it's mostly to add content to the game. Skyrim's DLC, all three pieces add a significant amount of content to the game. Dragonborn adds a whole new island full of stuff to do, new armor, new shouts, a new quest line, new side quests, and the island itself is pretty amazing. It's very, very different from Skyrim. And it's also um, kind of a good throwback for fans of the third Elder Scrolls game who may have set foot on the island before and now can see the island in full like HD, whereas before the graphics were pretty bad. So, um, yeah, the Dawnguard DLC, it adds another quest line, two new areas to the game, the Forgotten Vale and the Soul Cairn, which are both pretty big areas, and a few minor smaller areas, such as Castle Vokihar and Fort Dawnguard, and a few caves here and there, but that's about it. And it does change a bit. It adds new weapons. It completely revamps. Get it? That that wasn't too funny. It completely revamps vampirism and even lycanthropy. Like, if you're a werewolf, obviously the focus of Dawnguard isn't on werewolves, but it does add quite a bit of new content for people who want to play as a werewolf. And then you've got the Hearthfire DLC, the smallest piece of DLC, but it is also the cheapest. So it balances out. And I'd say $5 for all the stuff it adds is definitely worth it. You can build your own house. You can adopt children who will give you items and all kinds of stuff. Um, it's it adds new items to the game, new crafting methods, and overall it's not a ton of new stuff, but for the price, it's definitely worth it. So DLC, the purpose of DLC, I mean, yeah, the purpose is to get money, but it does so by adding new content rather than locking content behind you, if that makes sense. Now we're going to look at microtransactions. Microtransactions don't add anything new to the game. They simply allow you to get the stuff that's already there faster. And when you're paying, say, $120, because that's the number we came up with earlier, if you're paying $120 for stuff that was already in the game, it's quite reasonable to not like microtransactions. It is not it's not unreasonable to hate microtransactions, to be against them. I personally don't like microtransactions. I do like downloadable content though. But yeah, microtransactions, they're a pretty scummy practice because basically they're not adding anything new. You're just paying for the stuff you already have. So, yeah, those are just some more differences between downloadable content and microtransactions. So, the next thing I want to discuss is good microtransactions and good downloadable content versus bad microtransactions and downloadable content. Now, both of these things can be good and both of these things can be bad. And while DLC is often better than microtransactions, there are cases where microtransactions could possibly be better than downloadable content. So let's talk about that. Good microtransactions. This is not something you hear often. Most of the gaming news that's been coming out recently, not so much this year, although it is only February. In 2017, microtransactions were all over the news. You had your loot boxes, you had all kinds of things. Loot boxes were the main culprit. And yes, while loot boxes are often bad, they can be good. Now, there's basically two types of, uh, well, three types of microtransactions. You have your loot boxes, you have your currency, and you have somewhat of a mix. And I'm going to discuss that in just a bit. So let's talk about the first one. The first one is loot boxes. Loot boxes, you buy a set of loot boxes, and say you buy 50, you open them all up, you don't know what you're going to get. You could be getting like the best weapons or skins in the game. You could be getting absolutely nothing valuable. And they're really a gamble. So that's why a lot of people don't like loot boxes. You don't know what you're getting, and loot boxes are one of the microtransactions that people don't like because you have to buy a lot of them to get the items that you want. And they're not always bad. Uh, in Star Wars Battlefront 2, loot boxes, that was a huge controversy because loot boxes gave you items that would affect the gameplay experience. And this is the major turning point in microtransactions. Like before, people didn't really care about microtransactions that much. There were a few people who were outspoken against it, but uh, once once Star Wars Battlefront 2 and other games started giving out things that would affect the gameplay experience in the loot boxes, that was like crossing the line because You basically had to pay extra money to win the game. And people don't like that. Why would you pay extra money to win a game of Star Wars Battlefront 2 when you could play, say, Overwatch, which is another game I'm going to be talking about extensively in this video, when you could play Overwatch um and just get good through playing the game instead of paying to win and dealing with other people who are paying to win. Because you could be the best person at shooters in the world, but if the other person has better weapons than you, chances are they're going to beat you. If you could have like the best accuracy in the world, but if it takes you 5 shots with a pistol to kill someone, while the other person can kill you in 1 shot, there's no way you're winning. I mean, you could win if the other person is really, really bad, but chances are you're not going to win. Then we got the second type of microtransaction, which is currency. You see this a lot more in mobile games, like Clash of Clans. You basically have to you still have to pay to win pretty much, but you have a bit more control over what your money is going towards. In Clash of Clans, you can buy gems, and with those gems, you can do whatever. Like, you have complete control over how you spend them. If you want to spend them upgrading one thing, you can do that. If you want to spend them upgrading another thing, you can also do that. But the problem comes when you pretty much have to buy them to win. Like, theoretically, you could become the best person in Clash of Clans without spending any money. But that would require years of playing the game. And every time they added a new upgrade, it would take another like 14 days to get all the stuff in the upgrade. While other people would have that stuff instantly because they bought it with real money. And that's the problem. Like, theoretically, you could become the best at Star Wars Battlefront 2, but but that would take years of gameplay, and no one is going to do that. All right, then we get to the third point, which is a combination of the two. And this is something you will see a lot in gachas, which are basically mobile games with competitive mobile games with loot boxes. And I'm going to use Fire Emblem Heroes as an example for this one, because that's a gacha. You basically buy orbs, and the currency part comes because you need a certain amount of orbs to summon a hero. You need 5 orbs to make your first summon, and then the summons get cheaper and cheaper until it's down to like 3 orbs. But that's kind of where the problem comes in. That's where you have the split. Because you could buy. I'm not sure if you can actually buy like 1 orb. I don't think you can. But like, basically, you could see 300 orbs and think, wow, that's a lot. When in reality, each time you summon, you're spending 5 orbs. And that's gonna come out to 75 loot boxes. So it's a bit of a tricky practice because it looks like you're getting more than you actually are. And then finally, we have DLC. Now, good DLC is like Skyrim's DLC which I talked about before. This is good DLC. Oh, actually, I talked about the types of microtransactions, but I didn't talk about good and bad that much. Well, good microtransactions is basically Overwatch's microtransactions. You're not forced to get them. You can reasonably get everything in the game simply by playing. It's going to take a while, but you can reasonably do it. It's not going to take 4,000 hours to get every single item in Overwatch. I've played 400 hours, which is 10 times less, and I have almost every item. I think I have like 3/4 of the items. So you can reasonably do it. It's not an unreasonable task. And then also, you're not buying things that would affect the gameplay experience. You might be buying, say, skins, which look cool, but a legendary skin is not going to make you a better player than an epic skin, unlike other games where they very well could do that. A bad form of this DLC. This is kind of the middle ground. It's not things that affect the gameplay experience, but it's not quite as good as cosmetic items are games like Fortnite, where all the stuff is purely cosmetic. However, you can't get them through normal gameplay. You have to pay to get the skins. This is like the middle ground. It's not terrible. It doesn't make the game unplayable if you don't have extra money to spend, but it is really, really annoying. And yes, theoretically, you could get a skin in Fortnite through normal gameplay, but you'd have to wait, I don't know, 3 seasons because I think you can get like something like 200 V-Bucks a season, and 200 isn't going to get you anything. It costs like 2,000 to get a skin, 250 to get like a pickaxe. Like it's really not good. But and then we have DLC. DLC, pretty much any form of DLC is going to be better than the microtransaction equivalent. Good DLC is like Skyrim's DLC. You know what you're getting, you pay for it, and that's it. Normally, big purchases, season passes would fit under the good DLC category because you pay once and you have everything. Now, bad DLC, or it's not exactly bad, it's more of the middle ground type of thing, is like things like Hyper Devotion Nor DLC. Now, this DLC, there's a lot of it. There are, let's see, 38, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. 28 pieces of downloadable content. Now that's a lot. These downloadable contents, they range from $1 to like $2. It's really, really cheap stuff. And I'd say it's not bad. It's definitely better than, say, microtransactions. It Where it can get tricky though is when you have more downloadable content than this. 22 pieces that are $1 to $2. I think the total cost of all the downloadable content comes out to like $25, which is not bad at all. But then you get the bad stuff. And I'm just going to look this up. Train Simulator. This game is like the worst thing ever for downloadable content. Like, oh my goodness. There are so many pieces of Train Simulator DLC. I look up Train Simulator and there's 44 pages of results. 44. And not all that is actually Train Simulator. You get like the stuff at the end, which is like random stuff. But oh my goodness. There's a decent like 40 pages of Train Simulator downloadable content. And that's not even the worst part. Every single piece costs a lot of money. All the stuff on the first page costs like above $20. The cheapest stuff you'll find is $19.99, and the most expensive is $40, which is the cost of a 3DS game. You could buy an entire game for the cost of one piece of downloadable content. Now, this is bad downloadable content. This is not the way to go. And I'm very against the downloadable content like this. It is just ridiculous. $40 for an add-on that, like, does hardly anything. It's ridiculous. But anyways, enough about that. You have your good DLC, your good microtransactions, your bad DLC, and your bad microtransactions. And that's all well and good, but now we have to look at the direction that downloadable content and microtransactions is going. Now, 2017 saw a huge spike in games with microtransactions. And it wasn't good. Um, Before 2017, Overwatch came out in 2016. That was a good example of microtransactions. But 2017 had Star Wars Battlefront 2. It had like Need for Speed. It had NBA 2K18. Like loot boxes in a sports game. That is not good. Now, most of the games I mentioned were EA games. In fact, I think all of them were EA games. EA is like the worst gaming company ever. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Activision, but they're way better than EA. EA is the scum of the game development industry. They make trash games, in my opinion. So, yeah, not a fan of them at all. But yeah, they were the main culprit of 2017. Let's look at all the games from 2017 made by EA. Alright, so we got Star Wars Battlefront 2, microtransactions. FIFA 18, I think there were microtransactions. I might be wrong, but I'm like pretty sure. Need for Speed Payback, microtransactions. Madden NFL 18. Again, I'm not sure, but NBA had it, so I'm willing to bet that there were microtransactions. And then NBA Live 18. Microtransactions. And then we got a few other games. We have Mass Effect Andromeda, which no microtransactions, but it was still a terrible game. And then, yeah, we have this random game. We have like a few pieces of downloadable content, and like, yeah, it's not good. Like they are They shouldn't be allowed to make games, to be honest. And I'm gonna do a separate rant about EA because there's more to them than just microtransactions. They've done so much bad stuff that I could go on for hours about it. But like for now, yeah, like all the games they make have microtransactions. And microtransactions are more prevalent in 2017 than in any other year. And not the good kind of microtransactions either. We're looking at gambling microtransactions. Star Wars Battlefront 2 was bad microtransactions. NBA, bad microtransactions. Need for Speed, bad microtransactions. So, yeah. Alright, now to finish this up, we're going to look at Shadow of War. Now, this is an interesting game. And actually, I do have one more thing to talk about after this because I I'm a Xenoblade 2 fan and I have to talk about it. But yeah, Shadow of War. Now, this game is very controversial because it has loot boxes in a single player game, which is not good. Um, yeah. It has multiple types of loot boxes, which is interesting. Um, yeah, yeah. It's not good. Microtransactions in a single player game, it's not good. Um, it's just not something you want to do. It's not terrible because you're not competing against other players who would have an advantage by buying loot boxes instead of you. It's not like Star Wars Battlefront where you need to buy them to win. However, it's a gateway. It's a gateway into that. If if they can put microtransactions into a single player game, they're not the worst microtransactions ever. I mean, they're middle ground at worst, I'd say. But it opens the door for companies like, say, EA to put microtransactions that would affect gameplay in a single player game. And we have examples of this already with Bungie filing a patent for a gameplay system that would basically try to make it so you would have to buy loot boxes. And I think that was meant for multiplayer, but it could definitely be implemented into a single player game. There's no one stopping companies from giving the enemies better items, better armor, better weapons. There's nothing stopping any company from doing that to promote you to getting loot boxes. If the enemies have ridiculous weapons and armor and are pretty much unbeatable without buying loot boxes, and note how I'm saying loot boxes, not currency, loot boxes. You, because currency, that wouldn't be that bad. But imagine loot boxes in a single player game. You could spend $120 to defeat artificial intelligence. I don't think anyone would want that. I know I certainly wouldn't, and yeah. It opens the door for companies to do that, And that's why I'm against loot boxes in single player games. And then we have an interesting case with Xenoblade 2, which is, as some of you might know, my favorite game of all time. Uh, it's amazing. But this rant isn't about that game. The point is, it has elements of a gacha. You have to it's basically loot boxes in a single player game, except you can't buy them, which is amazing. I honestly wouldn't mind if more companies started doing this. Like if you had to if it was a gamble to get the stuff you wanted, but you couldn't pay to get it. This is honestly a really, really good system. Plus, I mean, I'm not even going to call it microtransactions because it's not microtransactions. It's it's loot boxes without the negative connotations that come with microtransactions. And that is amazing. That is honestly really cool. But anyways, this was kind of a shorter rant. I thought I was going to be able to talk about this a bit more, but I covered kind of some of the topics kind of quickly. Ooh, actually, yeah, there's a few more things I want to talk about. Season passes. I can't believe I almost forgot about this. I should probably start taking notes before I make the rants so I don't forget about stuff. But anyways, season passes. Now, season passes is something that has to do with DLC. You don't see this with microtransactions, but I personally think season passes are a great idea. Assuming that you don't have to buy more than one. If you buy a season pass, it should give you all the downloadable content. You shouldn't have to buy a new season pass every year for 5 years. That is bad, especially if the season passes cost $20 each or more. If you're paying $45 every year for a season pass, that is disgusting. But anyways, enough about that. Season passes, I think they're a good idea. I think they're a good idea. It definitely makes it, most of them, most season passes, not all, but most make it a little bit cheaper than buying all the downloadable content separately, which is great. I know a lot of people like that. Um, and it makes it a lot more transparent. With I talked about Hyper Devotion Nor earlier. That game has a lot of downloadable content, and if they're all $1, $2, it seems like not that much, but it adds up really quickly. This is why having too much DLC might not be a good thing. But with a season pass, if there was a season pass for that game that cost $25 or 23 or 24, however much it is, if there was a season pass for that game, it would be so much more transparent. You could see exactly how much you were spending and what you were getting. And that is a good way to go about doing things. And then we have weird cases. Final Fantasy 15 Royal Edition was announced recently, and that was a bit controversial because it's pretty much a Game of the Year edition, and Game of the Year editions are fine. Like, Game of the Year editions, they usually have the downloadable content installed already, and they cost about the same amount as the base game. So you're basically getting all the downloadable content for free. And this is great. However, you do have the problem that comes with people who bought the game normally. Because people who bought the game normally, I'm sure they don't want to be spending um 40 extra dollars when people are getting the same exact thing for $40 less, maybe even $50 less. Sometimes you get a Game of the Year edition that's like $10 off even, because prices tend to go down, especially if you buy things online. Like Skyrim Game of the Year edition right now, you could probably get that for really cheap. I bought Oblivion Game of the Year edition for like $19. It was really cheap. And then I bought it again on PC for even cheaper. It was like $5. So, if someone's paying $60 and then another $20 with for the downloadable content, and then someone gets the exact same stuff for $5, people have the right to be angry. They can't do anything about it. I personally am not against Game of the Year editions, but people do have the right to be upset. Uh, and then you have Final Fantasy 15 Royal Edition, which is interesting because it's pretty much a Game of the Year edition. It has the season pass content. However, there will be downloadable content coming out for Final Fantasy 15 after the Royal Edition comes out. So you basically have to buy the Game of the Year edition, and then you have to buy more downloadable content. And then the people who bought the base game at launch, they have to buy the okay, Final Fantasy Royal Edition has content that was not in the base game. Even if you have the season pass, it has more content than that. And you have to pay 20 extra dollars to get the Royal Edition content in your normal game. So say you bought the collector's edition of Final Fantasy 15, which is like say, I don't know, $100. I'm not sure if it's actually that much. I'm gonna assume it is. I'm gonna say it's $100. Then you buy the season pass, which I'm not sure exactly how much it is again, but I'm gonna assume it's like 20 or $30. So now you've spent $130. Then the Game of the Year edition comes out, and you have to buy the upgrade for 20 more dollars. Now we have spent $150 on the game. And then there's going to be more downloadable content. So you're probably going to end up paying $180 for the game. Assuming you bought the collector's edition, which I know not everyone does, but even if you didn't buy it, that's $40 less, so that's $140. Well, people who bought the Royal Edition, or people who bought like the Royal Edition after all the downloadable content is already out, they're paying a lot less. And yeah, people have the right to be upset about that. I know a lot of people are. I know a lot of people aren't too. I know a lot of people who would gladly pay $20 for the stuff that's being added. And I don't mean to be classist or anything, but like if you can't afford $20, you probably have bigger priorities than fighting the 3 new super bosses that come with the Royal Edition. So, yeah. That is all I have to say about downloadable content and microtransactions. I'm against microtransactions. I like downloadable content. I like Game of the Year editions. And that is all for today.